Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Before we bring on tonight's guest, I want to bring you up to speed on a couple of things. Number one, I initially planned to air this show as a special Halloween night show as a treat for you. Unfortunately, tonight's guest, Brittany, used a cheap cell phone to do the interview. When I had a chance to listen to the playback after recording that interview with her, I wasn't happy at all with the audio quality coming from her phone, so I talked with her about possibly redoing the interview with her using Skype instead. Well, she was nice enough to agree to do that, but unfortunately when we tried it using Skype, we had other problems. Those problems made it so that it was just better to use that first recording in the first place. So, that's where we're at, back at square one, using that first recording. Again, I apologize for the poor audio quality, but it's the best we could do. Thanks as always for listening. Tonight's guest is Brittany. Brittany, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hey, Brittany, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome.
Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 26 years old, and I haul for a living. I'm all over the country, and when I am home, I'm out with the horses, and that's about it. That's my life.
Well, that sounds like a good life to me. I love horses. Brittany, where did your encounter happen?
It happened in Central PA. It's like 45 minutes northwest from State College. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty much all woods. There's a few corn crops, and our closest neighbor at that time, I think, was like a mile and a half down the road. It was some old guy, but that's about it. We didn't even have a red light in our town.
Those are some of the most mountainous parts of Pennsylvania, aren't they?
Yeah, we're pretty much on the side of, what the heck is it called, Snowshoe Mountain. It starts up there, and then it works its way around us.
Yeah, I thought that's how it was. Your encounter happened when you were 7. What kind of complications do you think that caused you to suffer through that you might not have had to deal with if you'd had that encounter when you were older?
I don't know if it really would have changed anything. Maybe I would have been able to explain it better, but that would have been put about it. Maybe I would have had a little bit more credibility, because when you're like a kid, everyone's like, oh, you're just, making up something, or, you're exaggerating. I think that probably would have been the only difference.
For you, was that frustration you felt when people told you that basically you hadn't seen what you saw that day? Was that frustration from that side of this almost as bad as the encounter itself, seeing something as terrifying as what you saw that day?
I wouldn't say it as bad as seeing it, but it was definitely frustrating.
Oh, I'm sure it was. It's a shame you have to go through that. For a long time, you called what you saw a bear dog. Where did that name come from?
Well, at the time, that's the only thing I knew was stuff out in the woods that normal people see, like bear, dog, deer, some coyotes here and there, maybe a mountain lion, some turkeys. That's it. I never knew what this was. I wasn't allowed to watch, scary movies and stuff when I was a kid, so I didn't know what it was. Heck, the scariest thing I've seen as a kid was Jurassic Park.
Did people in your area talk about seeing something back then that looked like something crossed between a bear and a dog?
No, nothing I can remember. I mean, we've always been a hunting family, a fishing family, and pretty much my family out there. I mean, we have neighbors and stuff, but it's a pretty tight-knit community. I didn't hear of anything.
Well, if your closest neighbors were a mile or so away, there are a lot of places in between your property and theirs where something like this could roam and never be seen, so maybe they hadn't seen anything like that. Before you had your encounter, what kinds of things did you do in the woods, and how much time did you spend in it?
Oh, we were always out in the woods. All the time. Even in the wintertime, it was like my favorite thing. It's snow, and we'd go out there, and it's like a winter wonderland. That's all we had out there. We didn't have anything else. We didn't have a movie theater or a shopping mall. We had the woods and some fish.
That sounds like a great way to grow up to me. When you were out there in the woods, of course, when it wasn't winter time, what kind of things did you do? Did you ever hunt, or did you camp? What did you do?
We did do some camping. I wasn't old enough to go hunting yet. I was allowed to have a BB gun. We used to go down and We did have a town dump, and I used to go down and shoot some rats. That was about it. We rode four-wheelers and dirt bikes. I did do some fishing. Actually, I did a lot of fishing back then. That's about it.
Until the day when you had that encounter, had you experienced anything unexpected in the woods?
No, never had a problem. I mean, I've seen bears, and I've seen maybe one or two mountain lions here and there, some rattlesnakes, but nothing that really bothered me.
I know it's pretty eerie to think about, but I'll bet that wasn't the first time it had seen you. Maybe it was watching you for a while before it approached you that day. It's hard to say, we don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it was.
I don't know. I know you guys talk about like how the woods get silent and stuff. I don't ever remember that ever happening. And I used to go out by myself too sometimes, but it's never bothered me.
Well, not everyone who has an encounter reports the woods going dead silent like that. That's the norm, but that's not always how it is. So, yeah, don't think that that's how it's got to be. When we had that pre-interview and you talked with me about that encounter the first time around, you had a pretty good amount of trouble talking about what happened to you that day. And once the listeners have a chance to listen to the nature of this encounter, I'm sure they'll totally understand. Sitting here tonight, is it going to be easier for you to talk about this, or do you think you might have every bit as much trouble tonight talking about it as you did that first time around?
I hope it'll be easier, but it still terrifies me. And I think that's the hardest part, because then I start seeing it in my mind's eye. If that makes any sense.
Oh no, that makes perfect sense. All right, Brittany, please tell us about your encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right, I'll do my best. I was at my babysitter's house, and this was after school when we got done with our schoolwork and stuff. So it's like pre-dusk. It's just before dusk that this happened. And we were outside, and if you're facing the house, to the right of the house, there's like an open yard, and then there's woods, and then the back of the house is like a swampy area, and then to the left there's the driveway, and then it drops down in a little bit to a creek, and then it goes into woods after that. I started out over on the right side because me, my brother, and my babysitter's oldest daughter was there, and we had collected all these acorns for a fall feast at the end of fall. This happened in the fall. And we were deciding where to put these acorns. And it started like in an argument because they could not pick a spot where to put it. And I knew, being the little one, that I'm not going to be heard, so forget this. I'm going to go do something else. And then I decided I'm going to go try to catch some crawdaddies. I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to catch them? And I make my way around to the corner of the house to go across the front yard. And when I do go around the bend, I'm just completely entrenched, like kind of just looking down because it's open and just thinking about these crawdaddies. And I make my way across the front yard and over to the driveway, go across that, and then it goes down a little hill. And that's when, across the creek, I seen the feet and I froze. And this creek, like, only 2 feet across and only a couple inches deep. It's not deep at all. And I just remember standing there, just looking at these feet, like, you know, what the hell is that? And then I heard it start sniffing. That's when I got scared. Because it was like big sniffing. And I'm just sitting there looking at these feet, and then my brain just starts kind of going, and I'm froze. I'm just dead froze. And my heart's going, and I start slowly going up its legs. And then I get to, I guess, their hands. They look like hands, but dog hands with claws, and I'm totally just freaked out at this point. I'm even starting to shake now. It still freaks me out. And I'm just looking at him. I'm like, you know, in my brain, I'm trying to think, bear, dog, no, it's not a dog, it's not a bear. And I start going up, further up on its body. And this thing is just muscle. It's completely wrapped in muscle. And then I get to its head. And, you know, I actually pee myself. I remember peeing myself because it just absolutely terrified me. And it's looking at me. I'm looking at it. looking at each other. I'm looking at it, right in the eyes, and it's horrible. I'm totally freaked out at this point. And my brain just can't wrap around with what the hell is this? Is it a dog? Is it a bear? It's a bear. My brain's trying to put it in bear. I know it's not a bear. And I'm just looking at it, and it's looking at me.
Take your time.
Yeah, I'm trying to be better than last, like the first time I told you.
You're doing great.
My heart gets going, and I start getting anxious.
Oh, sure it does.
So I just remember, I was looking at his eyes, and it was just at that young age, I could tell there was a thought behind it, I guess, and a way to say it. And I was completely freaked out at that point. And my brain just couldn't, I wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. And I'm sure I was crying, but I don't even remember that. I just remember looking at it. It was horrible. And then it did at that point its ears were up, and it did a growling snap at me, and its ears went flat back, and its eyes completely changed to anger or pissed off, and I could tell that this was not good. And I'm still froze. I can't do anything. I'm just looking at it. I can see its teeth, and it's horrible. And then it went to lift its right arm, because it was going to touch my left. And it just started bringing it up slowly. It had no problem reaching across. Not at all. Not at all. It didn't have to move or anything. If it wanted to grab me right then and there, it definitely could have. Not a problem at all. I wouldn't have had to move an inch. And it brought its hand up with its claws. And these claws are I guess kind of like bear claws, but sharper, kind of like cat cross bear claws. It could definitely shred you. And it got to my arm and was nearly there, and then it heard, and I heard my brother and Ashley start yelling. At the time, I thought maybe they were yelling over here because I'm trying to yell for help or something, but my brain just won't let me. I'm trying to yell bear. It won't let me do that. But they were actually still fighting over the acorns. And when it heard them, its ears flicked forward, and then it spun, and it took off. It spun down on the floor and took off. And at that time, I remember watching it. I would go a couple paces, and then I passed out. That's the last thing I remember of it. The next thing I remember is waking up in the house with Janice over me with an ice pack. And I do remember at that point I'm falling, trying to, I'm dog bear, bear dog, it's there. I'm just a mess trying to tell them, what I've seen. I remember being so shook up, she had to call my dad to come get us early. I just couldn't relax, couldn't chill out. I'll tell you what though, the biggest relief was when my dad came through the door. I was so happy to see him, it still kind of brings me to tears, because that's my dad, nothing's gonna hurt me with my dad's tears. I was never so happy to see him.
I'll bet you were happy to see him. When he came through that door, did you tell him right away what you had been through, or did you wait to tell him?
Oh no, I was a babbling brook trying to tell him what I'd seen. I'm it's gonna get me, Dad. I was a babbling brook. And when he took me out, it was dark at the time he got there. I remember when he was taking us out there, I would not walk out to the car. He had to carry me out, and I buried my head into his shoulder because I was so scared that it was going to be out there.
I don't blame you after what you had been through. You said it was within grabbing distance, but at its closest, how close was it to you?
I was nearly touching my arm, like just right there. Right there. If it wanted to grab me, it could have, and I remember it lifting its pointer finger up a little bit, like it was getting ready to, like, touch me. Ooh, that still sends the shivers down me thinking about that. It still shakes me up. I'm still shaking.
I'm sure you are shaking talking about something like that. I know it was within grabbing distance of you, but as far as its body went, how close was its body to yours? About 3 feet? 4 feet? They have long arms, so I'm not really sure on that.
Just 2 feet. It was just right at the edge of the creek. Like, it wasn't in the creek, but it was, like, right at the edge of that creek. And I was right at the other edge, because, like I said, the driveway drops down a little bit to the hill, and it's just right there.
So its body was just 2 feet away from yours. Wow, that is too close. You compared its claws as being somewhat bear-like and also somewhat cat-like. If you had to make a comparison between a black bear's claws, you know, the way they curve, and a grizzly's claws, they're not perfectly straight, but they have a little bit of a curve to them. Which kind of claw did its claws resemble?
More of the straight one. They were more pointed at the end. They weren't definitely curled like a cat. They were thick.
Okay, I see. Let's talk about its eyes. It sounds like you got a really good look at them. Please go into more detail on describing them for us.
They were like a golden yellow color, almost like a cat, but not as yellow. They were definitely a round pupil. They weren't split. And they were pretty big, and they definitely had a thought behind them.
What would you say was the most disturbing thing about this Dogman?
But when I got to its head, the whole head, especially the eyes, totally freaked me out. The head was huge, like a bear. That's kind of like, I guess, where my brain puts the bear thing at.
Was its head disproportionately large for its body, or was it just a huge body and a head that basically was in proportion to that body?
No, it was just a big animal. Like, I'm 7 years old, I'm pretty short, so it loomed over me. It was just big. In general, just big.
I realize when you're 7, trying to estimate height, it's going to be really hard to do, but if you had to guess, how tall do you think this thing was?
Definitely bigger than my dad, I can tell you that. If I had to guess, you know, my dad's a pretty big man. He's almost 6 foot, and it was definitely bigger than him.
Yeah, they do get a lot bigger than that. It seems like every time someone talks about having a close-up and personal encounter with a Dogman, you have some critics who always say, well, if you were that close to a Dogman, why didn't you take a photo of the Dogman? Even if you would have been 30 or 40 and had a camera hanging from your neck, or say a cell phone in your back pocket, do you see there being any way you could have taken a photo of that Dogman that day?
Oh no, I was so scared I couldn't even yell for help. I couldn't run, I couldn't move. The only thing I could do was like move my eyes. That was it. That was it. No way was I going to be doing anything else.
Well, that only makes sense. Yeah, it's so easy to say, oh, I would have taken a photo, but if you're in that position, the same position you were in that day, yeah, it's a totally different thing. It's a lot harder to do it than what some of these people would give you credit for. You said its mood changed in a snap. Did you do anything that might have caused that change?
Maybe just looking at it in the eyes and its head. I don't know. I thought about that, but I don't know. I can't answer that because I can't think for that thing.
Well, let's face the facts here. You are 7 years old. You're placed in a situation that most people who are 40 or 50 couldn't have handled very well at all. You handled the situation the best way you knew how. You did a really good job of dealing with that very stressful situation. So I hope you don't beat yourself up over anything that you did during that experience. What's been the hardest thing about that experience to get over?
The woods. I never looked at them the same. I was never able to go back out, especially by myself. When I did go back out, I was always on like a fool or a horse. I could never just go back out and play in the woods. That never happened again.
Do you see it as an advantage that you know they're out there?
Well, you know what they say, ignorance is bliss. I wish I never seen it. I missed a lot of things with my family because I was too scared. Like hunting is a big thing in our family. I couldn't do it. I couldn't go out. Couldn't do it. Me and my dad used to take fishing trips for the first opening of trout. I had to wait until the sun came up, and then I always had to go with a group of people. We could never do our early morning at like 4 a.m. before the dawn cracked, and I couldn't do it anymore.
You had a very traumatic experience at a very young age. The fact that you can operate and live your life as effectively as you can and do, that says volumes about you. You deserve a lot of credit for being able to handle that situation and move on and deal with life as well as you have. So please don't beat yourself up about anything that maybe you can't do or can't do as easily as you would have been able to do it if you hadn't have had that encounter. Please don't lose sight of that fact. If I understand you correctly, did you say it was reaching out for you to grab you when your brother called out and made that sound that ultimately drove it away?
I don't know if it was going to grab me or just touch me. I don't know because it didn't complete the action, but it was definitely reaching out. I tried to put in my mind that it was just going to touch me instead of grab me because that absolutely terrifies me. I've had nightmares about that scenario finishing out that way. I really don't know.
Yeah, it's so easy to run things like what happened to you over and over and over again in your head until you almost drive yourself crazy. Am I to understand that it stopped reaching out for you because of that sound your brother made, or did it stop the motion of reaching out for you right before your brother called out and drove it away?
No, it was right when my brother and Ashley started getting loud. That's when it stopped and its ears flicked forward.
Okay, I see. I just wanted to get that straight. What was its leg structure like? Were the legs more hominid-like in structure, like a Sasquatch or a human, or were they more canid-like, like a dog, horse, or a cat?
A dog. Definitely a dog.
When all this was going on, did you ever smell any strange scents?
No, I don't remember sounds. No, I just remember it sounds. Nothing else around me until my brother and Ashley started getting loud. I was just so frozen and like mind warped that was it. That was the only thing my mind was focused on. And prior to walking up, I don't remember any sounds. I don't remember anything out of the ordinary. I was just so entrenched in my crawdaddy and thing that I didn't hear or think of, nothing came to my mind I can think of.
Something I hope you don't lose sight of is the fact that there are so many 7-year-olds out there, Brittany, who if they had had this experience, they would have spent the rest of their lives drinking food through a straw. They would not have been able to handle that experience nearly as well as you have. I know it's really hard to deal with, it's so hard to get over, but you deserve so much credit for being able to handle that as well as you have. It might not seem like you're dealing with this all that well at times, but trust me, you are definitely dealing with this very well.
Well, I think a lot of it was my dad, too. He wasn't like everyone else trying to say, well, you seen a bear, or you just seen a dog squatting, or, you bumped your head and fell, and, that's just what you dreamed in your head. He just always sat and listened to me. He never really argued with me, and he just never really said anything about it either. Maybe that was it. I'm not quite sure.
Well, sometimes the best thing a person listening to you talk about an experience like that can do is just to sit there and listen. It sounds like that's what your dad did, and I'm so glad he did that. I'm so glad he didn't make fun of you or shoot down the fact that you had that encounter. That helped you a lot, maybe a lot more than what you even realize.
I think so. I never told him details like I told you. I just kept trying to tell him a bear dog. That's about all I could say at that time.
When you're 7, it's awfully hard to express yourself, so that's to be expected. So then I'm clear on this whole reaching out for you thing. You said that it had its index finger, its pointy finger. It was out, almost like it was pointing at you. But what were the other fingers doing? Were the other fingers against its palm, or were they somewhat open, as if it was going to grab you? What were they doing?
They were open, and he just kind of lifted his finger. They were never clenched or anything. They just kind of lifted up his finger.
Has there ever been a point where you were able to go out and enjoy the woods in somewhat of a carefree fashion, whether you're with a group of people, or is it a situation where no matter what you do, you still have a hard time enjoying yourself out there?
Well, I still have a hard time. I'm very, cautious. I pay attention. I get uneasy, even when I guess I shouldn't be. Like, say we're in an open lake area, but there's one on around, corners and the outskirts of it, I still get uneasy. I still keep my eye on the wood line.
That's what most people who had an experience like that would do, so that's totally normal. Do you have any idea why that dogman was there that day in the first place?
No, the only thing, I've thought about that a lot. The only thing I can come up with, maybe it was getting a drink, maybe it was going up for the crawdaddy too. I don't know. I don't know any reason why it would be there. I mean, Janice kept a meticulous house, and the trash was only taken out in the morning because of the bears. And that was taken all the way down the driveway, down into the dirt road where it went out to the main road. So that wasn't even there. And it had to have known we were there, because it's not like we're quiet, and we're out there every day. So it had to have known we were there. I don't know why it was there.
Well, there's no way to think for these things. They do what they do for whatever reasons they might have. You could drive yourself crazy trying to figure them out, because it sure doesn't seem like there's any rhyme nor reason. Considering the fact that we're talking about central PA here, is that area where this happened, is it almost overrun with black bears and deer, or what's the situation like there?
Oh, there's tons and tons of deer. Tons of deer. There's quite a bit of bear out there. I remember, we had a bird feeder, and almost every night we get out there, and there I come with a pot and pan and smacking it to scare them off. So they're definitely out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for them to roam out there. Did you ever get the impression that dogman might not have been alone that day?
I don't know, because I was so focused on that one. I can't answer that. I don't know. I thought about that too after I heard some other stories about him running in packs, but I was so focused on that one, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's one of those situations where it's just so hard to know. Did you ever feel like it might have come back around after you had that encounter?
That one is a maybe, because, like I said, it was a school night. Definitely wasn't a Friday, and we had to go back to Genesis the next morning for school. My dad would drop us off. And I remember her saying that we weren't allowed outside for a while because there was a crazy naked man running around, and it wasn't safe for us to be outside. And at the time, I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but I was happy because I didn't want to go outside, but I didn't really think much of it. Now I'm like, I wonder if maybe she's seen something, or maybe went back out and seen the tracks, and it was kind of soft, like right at the creek edge. But it was just weird because she's never said anything like that. So I can't answer for her. I never asked her. I don't see them anymore. So maybe, I don't know.
Well, if the dirt was that soft next to the creek, I wouldn't be surprised if she did go out there to investigate and did see some prints. It's kind of strange to explain it away as it being a naked man outside running around, but I guess that still gets the job done because, like you said, you didn't have to go out there. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I wasn't going to complain.
I don't blame you. Do you live in the same area now where you had that encounter?
No, my dad still lives there. A lot of my family does, so I still visit.
If your family still lives in that area, what kind of concerns do you have for them and their safety?
Well, my dad he's a very active hunter, so is my Uncle Mike and stuff, and I always tell him, just be very cautious. I know I'm not going to change their minds. They're not going to stop. Just be cautious, and I tell them, don't go out by yourself. And they've always been very good about that. We're very safety-oriented, and they always have walkie-talkie, and everybody always goes out in pairs. There's not much more I could say to them other than, be aware.
Yeah, there's something about the idea of heading out before dawn to a tree stand in an area where you know these things are. You can only look in one direction at a time. And then once you get to the stand and you're sitting there all day, you've got your back to about 180 degrees of wood all that time, where something like that could sneak up on you. The idea of that is just so hard to get over. It's so creepy. It makes you wonder how many deer hunters have been out there in a stand and had one of these things right behind them, but they never knew. They were totally oblivious.
Well, I hope they never know. Like I said, ignorance is bliss, and maybe they'll just keep going on their merry way, and my dad will keep going on his.
I'm with you. I hope they never do find out about these things. When you're watching TV or you hear a friend tell their kids that monsters aren't real, does this send a shiver up your spine, knowing that they are in fact real? What's your take on that?
Well, I don't think it's right to go around scaring little kids. That's just not something we should do, but I do believe we should teach them to be aware of their surroundings and to never just wander off without a current world like I did. That's definitely not a good thing to do.
Oh, I'd say. Let's talk a little more about your occupation. You're in an unusual circumstance here because of the fact that you know dogmen are real, and because of your job, you're required to be in some very remote locations at night. I can't imagine what that must be like for you. What kinds of steps? You talked about some of the steps you've taken to try and help protect yourself because of the work you do. But what other kinds of things have you done to try and protect yourself when you're out there in really lonely places at night?
Oh, my first thing is, in my trailer, I equipped it with special LED lights, which are very luminous, and those are running constantly when I'm stopped and I'm unloading my freight, and they illuminate around my truck at least 10 feet out. And then I've also put spotlights on my truck, which are, they're like deer spotlights. They go out pretty darn far. And then my engine, I specifically got a special engine made because it's loud. It's very loud when it's running.
There's something important I need to share with you, and I also need to share with anyone who's listening who might have an encounter of their own. For some reason, there's this canard that as long as you have an area brightly lit, that's basically a guarantee that a dogman won't come into that area. That's not true, so please don't make the mistake of thinking that just because you have bright lights on an area, that makes it so they won't necessarily come into that area, because that's just not true.
Well, I kind of figured that. Like I said, it's a deterrent, and hopefully a deterrent to kind of turn away a situation that could arise.
Oh, I agree, yeah. It's a really good idea to have bright lights like that. Yeah, it can only help, so that's a good idea, like I said. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share with the listeners?
I'm just hoping that maybe my coming out with it to maybe help someone else talk about it and share with it. Or maybe someone that doesn't believe with it, maybe they'll believe and be more cautious. Because they're definitely designed as a hunting animal. They're definitely not, eating leaves. And I do believe that they could go to hurting or kill someone. And I would hopefully deter someone or a situation from coming out. That's what happens.
Thank you so much for coming on tonight, Brittany, and telling us about that experience. I really do appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate what you do. I never knew what these were until I stumbled across your show, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what I see. I'm not the only person out here. I'm not crazy. You're a big help.
You're definitely not crazy, and I'm so glad to hear about how the show has helped you. That's what this is all about. Well, thanks again so much for coming on, Brittany. Have a great night.
You have a good night, too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.